Andy Brixey, personal trainer at the Rereading Gym. Thank you so much for listening to the Rereading Gym podcast. This week, Annalisa talks with author Stephen Oliver about how to find an agent. This is a question that many of you have written in about how to write a query letter, how to research agents, and how to really find one that works for you. They are ready to answer all of your questions, so make sure and give this a really good listen. And as always, if you're confused about your work right now and really need some guidance and are thinking about what can I do to take my work from the slush pile to publishable, make sure and go to www.datewiththemuse.com/book-a-call to book a session with Annalisa to talk about where your writing is right now and find out if you could be eligible for a spot in one of our amazing Writing Gym programs. Thank you so much for listening. Happy writing.
Hello there, writers and muse daters. I am so excited to be speaking with you today with Stephen Oliver. We're going to talk today about how you finish a fiction manuscript and then find the right editor, and also how you get an agent. So Stephen is here today to talk with us about his experience and how he has worked through that process and had success. So welcome, Stephen. We're so glad to have you here.
Glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about sort of where your life was before this whole process started. What kinds of things had you tried that didn't work, or what was really frustrating you about the process you were going through?
For me, the single biggest frustration, problem, however you want to say, was, first of all, making sure I had a decent product. I went as far as I could with that, but the bigger one was getting out there. I self-published a book back in 2013. I then tried various methods of getting work done. For instance, I found a company in the UK that would do, what's the word I'm looking for? Not mail shots. Basically put stuff out to the media, magazines, newspapers, etc. Cost me quite a lot of money. I got feedback from a couple of people. I sent out copies of my book for them to work with, and I got one citation. And that was a local magazine in Canada. And I live in the UK, so I'm not sure how much that has actually done for any sales. When I then started to write fiction, I was working on a fantasy novel. I then started with something I find much more fun, and that is short stories, because you can tell your whole story. If you can do that in 500, 1,000, 20,000 words, it's actually in some ways more easy than trying to write an entire 100,000 word novel.
Right.
So I wrote my first collection of short stories and had that ready. I then sent it out, actually, to someone who said they would do editing work for me. Again, charged me quite a lot of money. And the feedback was, quite honestly, rubbish. She wanted me to change entire stories. For instance, some of the stories I felt had to be written in the first person. She insisted they were written in the third person. Other points, she wanted me to remove certain bloody scenes. Annalisa can confirm that there are one or two bloody scenes in my stories. And she said, that will scare people off. And I was thinking, but it doesn't improve the story to remove them. It actually makes them worse. And after a while, we broke off our contract together. I found out later that she was actually a specialist in non-fiction work. She was probably as much out of her depth as I was out of mine. So the result was, I just put it on the back burner. What am I going to do? No idea. But the point was that I carried on writing. I had a second book finished. I started on a third. And then, quite by chance, I came across Annalisa, who I'd gone on to her one of her forums, Write to Publish, on Facebook, And she mentioned that she just published a book called Storytelling for Panthers. And I got the early access copy. I thought it was wonderful. I bought the Kindle version. I still think it's wonderful because for the first time in my life, here was somebody who actually understood the way that I write. I'm a pantser. When I'm writing fiction, I often have no idea where I'm going. I often start a story with literally a title, and then I start writing, and I let the muse take me where I want. Case in point, Christmas the year before last, I was doing a little exercise, and I wrote a story called Santa's Little Secret. That story is less than 1,500 words long, and it changed direction about 5 times because I would be writing and then suddenly a sentence would sort of come out of me, and I go, wow, now there's an interesting point. And I carry on taking that into account, and then a little bit later, another one will come up. Whoa, what's going on here? And I must admit, very much of my writing is like that. Not my non-fiction writing. There, I will do an outline, but once I've got the outline, then I'm back into free form, and I write what comes from inside me. I'm very much, I must admit, someone who writes from the gut. I've got no idea where half of these stories came from. In fact, probably I've got no idea where most of them came from. But the whole point is, Annalisa understands this kind of writer. She encourages us. Various books that I've read over the years, like Take Off Your Pants, basically are trying to turn pantsers into outliners and planners. And I find whenever I do that, my story just stands still in the water. I may have an inkling where it's going. For instance, a story I'm writing about problems with fairyland right now. I had no idea where it was going, and I'm quite happily writing. And then I introduced 2 new characters, and I thought, what's so special about them? So I kept writing, and I suddenly discovered the fairies have come across a troll and a dwarf who are going to help them. They're not enemies, they're going to be friends. And so suddenly I've got whole political situations going on. Why is there problems? Do the dwarves hate the trolls? And if so, why? All of these things, literally, they're coming out of my subconscious mind. And yeah, that's a big problem for me. So after I read this book from Annalisa, what I actually did was I contacted her directly and said, do you do editing work? Because she had mentioned she was a senior editor. And she said, of course I do. So we had a little chat. I contacted her. We talked online. And next thing I know, she's editing my book. And it was wonderful. I mean, she appreciated my style. She appreciated the way I was working, and suggested where I needed to change things. For instance, there was in one story, there was a rape scene, which he thought might not go down very well. So I removed that, put in something completely different, which has actually strengthened the story. So she understands how I write. She even got me to write an entirely new story, which she felt needed to go between 2 other stories to explain a transition, a segue from one storyline to another. And she's also been very good at getting rid of what she calls my Britishisms, because sometimes I will use a turn of phrase which only someone in the UK will understand. Now, there's only 68 million of us here. There's 300 and God knows how many Americans, and then we've got the Canadians, all the people down under and so on, who will probably not understand what I'm saying. So she has basically also been helping me look into an international market, not just limiting myself to here, but actually a market where other people will go, yeah, I understand what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And so very much, sorry,
Stephen, but you've mentioned so much, and I just want to recap for the people who are watching, because we started off kind of talking about what wasn't working, and it sounds like there were 2 different things that weren't working for you. There was one, this self-publishing experience where you were having trouble getting the book out into the world. Even though you hired someone to help you, you only got 1 article into a Canadian magazine or newspaper. And so it's really hard to get a self-published book out there. So that was kind of problem number one. But then there was also the problem of finding an editor who could help you, but who also understood how you wrote. Did I recap the problem pretty well?
Perfectly. That's exactly where I was. But we are now talking about two different books. My first book, the one where I was publishing and having sales problem, that's still a problem. That's something that will be needed to look into sometime. But that is a non-fiction book, a self-help book that I did. This is now, I'm concentrating these days primarily on fiction writing. And in there, you match my writing style, my thinking style very, very well indeed. And that is a great relief, I must admit.
Oh, well, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. So, if we kind of like move into what was the solution, it sounds like your experience working with me in the publishing mastermind, moving through that revision process, and now we're into the agenting process, has really gotten you the results that you were looking for. So can you talk a little bit about, you talked about sort of pantsing and what the editing experience was like, and then you just mentioned, I see Andrew has written a funny comment about the 300 and God knows how many Americans, which is hilarious. But, what you and I have talked about is what is the American market looking for, which is where we're targeting your piece, is into the American
Exactly.
market. But also the agents that we're looking at are people who come from a background of working with international rights, so that we can get your book out into England, Australia, India, across the English-speaking world, so that you've got international success. So talk a little bit about what that experience has been like for you.
Well, at first it was quite difficult, because I had to start thinking a little bit differently. I had to start thinking, I suppose, like a marketer. Writing the query letter, for instance, the letter that is your first contact with an agent, where you're explaining who you are, what you've written, and why you think it's different. And that, I hadn't realized, is probably the most important thing. I mean, my story collections, multiple, go under the title that I'm working on. My working title is Paranormal City, where basically you've got an imaginary city, which could be anywhere, but where the paranormal is very, very deeply embedded within it. It's not, it might be somewhere like New York or London, but if it is, then there are sides of it that nobody suspects, except maybe a few policemen, some people in the military, and of course the weird and wonderful people who actually live there. Now, the point was that there are loads and loads of supernatural and urban fantasy and all these stories out there. I mean, look at the success of things like Twilight, or if you're looking in the movie world, Underworld, the whole series there. This is very much a trope that's around, very prevalent in modern society and so on. But the point is, my stories, I look at them from a slightly different point of view. My own, perhaps rather quirky way of looking at things. But the whole point is, I have my own view of what's going on in the supernatural world, where these things are going. And I don't really like the idea of sparkling vampires, for instance. Mine don't. But they will suck your life out of you and completely destroy you without even touching you. Only a short story.
I think,
don't worry about it.
Recap, having been part of the experience, I think that what you're saying is that the publishing mastermind not only offered you the opportunity to edit your novel, well, in your case, a short story anthology, really well, and to understand who you are as a writer and to really embrace who you are as a writer, but moving into finding an agent, it really was thorough in the way that it looked not only at the artistic elements of your piece, but also many other elements that agents and publishing houses are going to be looking for to help you to be successful.
Right, that's exactly what I was going to come to. So I had to write a query letter. I mean, Annalisa helped me with that. We sat down, we literally sentence by sentence took it apart.
Couple of times.
This is something several times. Come on, let's be honest, several times. But the whole point is, I looked at it from the point of view of the creator. She looked at it from the point of the view of someone who is trying to sell for an idea, a concept. So, as I was saying, you have got to be different. You have to do a synopsis. Something that she threw at me, and I think is a wonderful idea, is what she's called the elevator pitch. You're in an elevator with the publisher. You've got 30 seconds. Put your point across. Go. And that is exactly what we've done. We've already submitted to one agent. We're looking at a couple of others. I'm going through a whole book full, and I mean, we are talking book.
Yeah, a big old book.
Look at the size of that. I'm making my way through that to try and find other possibilities. You know, there's a huge market out there, but the thing is, I need someone who's experienced in that market. I admit I've got no idea what I'm doing there. I need someone to guide me and point me in the right direction, give me the tweaks, and where necessary, the kick in the pants to get me actually doing something.
Right. And so you raise a really good point, Stephen, because in the first round of submissions, we went with agents who I know, agents who I have a personal relationship. One of them I'm having lunch with in New York next week. You know, these are agents who I've already introduced to you. They already know your work. So talk a little bit about the caliber of agents that I've sent your way in the Publishing Mastermind. Okay, well,
there are three we're talking about. The first one, to whom we've already sent this first query letter, is has got quite a career behind her. She has worked with, or for even, some of the big five in America, the big publishing houses. She knows the people in there. She's got the contacts. She's got the insider information, for want of a better word. She knows who would be most interested in what sort of story. And if she's pitching on your side, I'm sure then there's going to be a lot of very big guns firing for you. Next one is working for a company that has a huge international readership. They are agents for people. When you go on their website, you find that they are connected to the English-speaking world, but also non-English in India, Romania, Europe, Asia. You know, they're huge things. So perhaps, you know, this is perhaps someone that we need to cultivate. We'll find out what happens. And the third one has quite a few high-powered people. It's, again, an agency is one person within the agency, but they seem to have quite a lot of fairly high-powered authors in there who are published by the big houses. And the thing is, as Annalisa pointed out on more than one occasion, an agent is someone with whom you want to have a long-term relationship. I have an anthology of 3 books. The third one is 3/4 finished, but there's another book that I've already started, which is like an offshoot. Like NCIS, it's an offshoot of JAG, for instance. These are, you know, there's lots of possibilities of having a relationship with this agent, which may go on until the end of my life. I don't know. But you see, I need someone who will guide me in the direction, will help me, will point me, and will tell me what to do. And that's why Annalisa, with her contacts in the industry and her insight into my writing, I find is probably the best person to help me at this point in my life, and hopefully will be for a long time to come.
Well, I love working with you, and so I hope so as well. So, you know, we can never know what the path would be that we hadn't taken in life, but this sort of trajectory that you were on before we met, Stephen, where you ended up with this editor who wasn't very helpful, where you ended up with a publicist who wasn't very helpful, versus where you are now, if you kind of compare those two, what do you notice in your life?
Well, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about the whole thing. I have a feeling that my stories may very well get out there to a very large audience. I'll never be a Stephen King or anything like that, but as long as there are a lot of people out there who have caught my name, who know who I am, who go, oh, he's just published a new book. Well, let's go and have a look at this. You know, I want to tell stories. I'm a storyteller. I've been a teacher. well, I was actually a software engineer, but I've taught people, and I just love telling stories. I've got a book, not a book, a file on my system, which has got, I don't know how many hundreds of ideas, some of which I've gleaned off the internet or out of prompt books, others ideas I've come with. I mean, if I could just carry on writing just from what I've got there, I'm still going to be around in the next millennium writing.
Woo!
And that is my joy in life. Writing, creating new stories. That is the reason for living for me nowadays.
Yeah.
And with Annalisa at my side, I'm feeling very optimistic about what's going to happen.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And I'm so glad you said that, because I'm sure a lot of the people watching can really resonate with that idea. You know, we typically, those of us who are writers and authors, we're writing because we're compelled to, because we have a passion for it, because we've got a message that almost is this living being on its own, not to get too paranormal city, but it's really sort of something living inside of us that we need to express, that has to come out. So what would you say are the biggest results from your experience in the Publishing Mastermind?
First of all, I've now got a product of which I am really proud. I mean, I liked what I'd written, but now that we've been through, I reread it recently. I'm just doing sort of a little bit of revision work, you know, the odd tweak there, change the odd word here or there. But as I was reading it, I was thinking, God, if somebody else had written this and I was reading it, I'd go, that is a pretty good writer. And if I can feel that, you know, having not read my book for a couple of months now, because we've been working with the publishing and agent side of things, if I can feel that about everything I've written, then, you know, it's going to be a wonderful experience to go on. And it's what encourages me to keep going. The last couple of weeks, I haven't written much. Annalisa knows that I have one or two medical problems. But the whole point is, what is going on otherwise? You say it's a passion. For me, writing is almost like an addiction, in a positive way. I mean, I have actually been traveling for 3 days, going on vacation. We were driving for 3 days. But in the evenings, while we were sitting and waiting to get a table in the hotel on the way, I set up my iPad and wrote, because the ideas have been bubbling in the back of my head while I was driving, not in the front of my head because I was driving, but, you know, I could feel these ideas developing, things coming out. And it's like there's, well, to use a very, very powerful word, inspiration. The word originally meant to breathe in the breath of the gods. As in, the gods inspired you to create. And that's how I sometimes feel when an idea will pop up and I will sit down and I will be so excited and I will write and it will just flow out of me. And to be able to do that and then sell that to somebody as an idea, oh wow, that's going to be the best thing in the world. And to have other people reading my stories, finding that I like what I've written is fun for them, that's going to keep me going for a long time. And, you know, if to all of you out there who are listening in on this, if you're not writing, I'm sorry, but in my eyes, you're fools. Go out, write. Even if it's a load of rubbish, you may come, one phrase will pop up and that will inspire you to write something more and more. Then go to Annalisa, let her help you, or not Annalisa, someone else who perhaps fits your style of writing better, whoever. But go out, get someone, put your stories out there. And if your stories are in any genre that I read, I'd love to read them.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And I know that you talk with a lot of writers, you know, every day in your life, because writing is a huge passion or compulsion or addiction of yours, whatever word you want to use. And when you talk to them, you know, why do you tell them that they should join the Publishing Mastermind?
Well, especially if they're like me. One thing I found on quite a few forums is that a lot of people are perhaps even a little bit embarrassed about being pantsers or about not writing up to the standards of that they perceive to be the requirement. in the industry. They want to be the next J.K. Rowling or next Stephen King. In fact, when someone said, who do you most want to be? And I put down, I want to be the most famous me. And that's it. I have my own voice, my own way. And Annalisa, you have helped me find that voice and get it down to a style that I like. And I would recommend anyone, go to the publishing group. Maybe you'll discover, no, this isn't actually what I want, but it might point you in the direction of going, wow, this is exactly what I need. I need someone who knows how to edit, knows how to publish, has contacts in the industry, someone who understands writing and publishing. And then, my friends, that's where you're going to then start publishing your own works, going down your journey. And who knows, one day we may meet at some writers' convention, you and I sitting next to each other, signing books, and we'll go look at each other and go, thank God we talked to Annalisa.
I love that. And hopefully I'll be there. I'll be taking pictures and smiling.
Oh, you'll be on the other side. You'll be on the other side.
Oh, well, Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening over in England to share your expertise and your wisdom and your experience with all of the writers here. I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait until we're doing the video of your book coming out with one of the big publishers out there.
I look forward to it.
All right. Have a good night, Stephen, and to all of you, happy writing.